All right, everyone, welcome to our DevOps office hours. It's June 8th, 2022. My name's Eric Osterman, and I'll be leading the conversation. I'm the founder and CEO of Cloud Posse. We're a DevOps accelerator, which means we help companies own their infrastructure in record time by building it together with your team and showing them ropes. If that sounds interesting, head over to cloudposse.com/quiz to get started. Again, that's cloudposse.com/quiz to get started. For those of you new to the call, the format's very informal. My goal is to get your questions answered. So feel free to unmute yourself at any time if you want to jump in and participate. If you're tuning in from our podcast or YouTube channel, you can register for these live and interactive sessions by going to cloudposse.com/office hours. Again, that's cloudposse.com/office hours. We host these calls every week. Our call today is recorded, and we'll automatically post a recording of our session to the YouTube channel. So if you enjoy the content and really want to support what we do here, it's a big help if you hit those like and subscribe buttons. Just head over to youtube.com/cloudposse. Again, that's youtube.com/cloudposse. So with that said, going to jump over to some announcements here. So got a number of things to talk about. One of the things I do want to talk about in the Q&A, but to give you a heads up, Vlad, if you are up for it or not, you had some interesting, controversial tweets this past week on platforms. I thought that would be an interesting conversation topic if you're up for it.
Oh, God, sure.
Well, you're brave enough to come out and say something like that, and not many would do that, so that's cool. We'll get to that in a second. So first thing, this was an article. It was on Hacker News this week. It stood out to me as, well, first, what a freak accident. This person lived somewhere in the UK, and their house was hit by lightning, head-on strike, and it fried his phone, which he uses for MFA for everything. And it also fried his FIDO key, and he had no access to his passwords, and trying to reset the passwords on his personal life was impossible. I ran into this previously when I was on vacation in Mexico a couple of years ago. My phone got fried, and I couldn't then log into any systems. And I did, fortunately, in my case, have a backup. It was at home in the US, but no way to access it. And here I'm in a foreign country. So that's another situation like where we're so dependent on these things. I've always been curious, like, what do people do with their, drawing a blank, what do you call it? The MFA key that everyone had. But the authenticator that every 99% of people who have one of these.
Google Authenticator?
No, the physical fob, the device that there's only one of, and
YubiKey?
The YubiKey, thank you. YubiKeys, just brain fart there. But with like the YubiKeys, there's no way to create a replica YubiKey, is my understanding. And that's always scared me away from even using them, therefore, especially like for your master AWS accounts. What happens? What is the process if you need to have continuity and the person with the YubiKey is out of the office on vacation?
Trusting another administrator.
But you can only have one YubiKey on a root account in AWS. So we're not talking IAM users, just the actual root.
So it isn't possible to raise IAM to a level where it might unlock your root account?
No, I don't believe so. Yeah.
Well, I guess you talk
to
Amazon.
Chat with support though to get MFA removed from your account.
Probably that would be
a complex validation process to ensure that you actually own the account, and you had a weird accident.
I have a similar story actually too. One of them took 100 hours and a lot of pictures of people with their passports next to their face.
Oh, wow.
So the provider for that was GoDaddy. And not to mention the bribe.
What was the last one you said?
The bribe.
The bribe?
Yes. My manager offered his free shopping spree to the person who eventually helped him.
Wow.
We're an e-commerce site, so he got $100 gift card that he gave away.
That's what it took. But yeah, that, I mean, that's the same kind of thing. It's like, how do you get around those situations?
So I will tell you a second story, and this one is unsolved since May. So I have a friend that I've known since '94, and after his operation, he lost his memory.
Oh
He
man.
did not recognize his family or speak any language when he came out of the coma. He eventually relearned who his family is in English, and maybe 6 weeks later, his wife calls me and tells me that he remembers me in the early days when I lived in the Dominican Republic. So
Me being you, Ralph.
Yeah,
Mhm.
exactly. So till today, we're talking operation around March. I talked to him the first time after the operation in May, and it's been like relearning this new person that's kind of has personality traits of the old person, but is not really the same individual. And as such, he does not have access to any passwords. The 2 years of COVID are gone. German and Spanish are gone. And anything to do with his resume is gone.
And all the password reset questions are a mystery because he lost his identity.
He lost his memory, but now he's also lost his domain. Now his domain hasn't been squatted on, so he could regain it. And it is an interesting story because I don't know what to tell him. And I'm if anybody has any ideas, I am all ears, and I'm happy to invite him to this meeting. He speaks English perfectly well now. He's not a geek anymore in terms of he doesn't do VMware or any of those things like Linux or Python or even typing that are on his resume.
So I think the lesson there is just being grateful and not taking for granted, and how quickly things can be turned upside down.
So I gave the story to somebody else who told me, I have this envelope in a safe. My wife has the combination. I have a, he had a solution for this.
So what's funny is he said he had a safe with backups, and the backup wasn't lightning. The safe wasn't lightning proof, and I got fried too. So if one can believe that, it's insane just how unfortunate.
I have paper backup keys in a safe that is fireproof. That's what I do.
Yeah.
I think a second copy of those.
Safe, yeah.
And a second copy of those in my safe deposit box at the bank, just in case.
So I don't know if this is anything to help, but maybe reducing the number of passwords you have altogether. And iOS or an Apple Mac came out with this ability of PassKeys now, so you can get away from passwords altogether. I wonder if that will reduce some of this impact.
But only if you use Safari.
Only if you really.
I'm not joking. Yeah. That's a limitation. Yeah.
That is a major limitation.
That's really frustrating.
Yeah.
This is Apple's implementation of the FIDO Alliance, which is a standard protocol. So it's going to be implemented in Chrome, Edge, whatever, everything else. So this is
eventually
is the Apple specific name for an open source standard, basically.
Okay.
I pasted the link to the FIDO Alliance in the Zoom chat.
Have you considered using the TOTP engine from Vault?
They just announced this, didn't they, the other day, that this is their new way of doing things?
It was not for a while. It went GA recently, I think. So basically, all the big providers, Apple, Microsoft, Google, Mozilla, 1Password, everybody decided, no, passwords are terrible. We're gonna do hardware keys, and we're gonna share the keys between our between our walled gardens. That's an oversimplification. I'm not a security person. Go fidoalliance.org. Read it up there.
It's worth reading too. I'll check that out.
I guess in the case of AWS, somebody's paying the bill, and that person will probably get that account back.
Yeah, with AWS, I think it's, but it is still a pretty disruptive thing.
Yeah, AWS is in a really stupid place that they only allow you to have one MFA token assigned per account, where most other services allow you to have at least a backup one or second one or whatever. Like I have 2 YubiKeys as an example, and I have them both registered for almost every service I subscribe to, except for AWS because they won't allow it.
Has anybody, you know, the T-Mobile was notorious for this, right? All these SIM swap hacks and the social engineering there to take over people's accounts and then subsequently take over every other account that they could using that. Have you ever heard of AWS support getting social engineered, taken over?
I haven't heard of it, but it doesn't
Yeah,
mean
I
that
haven't
doesn't
heard of it
happen.
either.
Who would admit to it though? I mean, the victim's not going to admit to it, and AWS is not going to admit to it, right? So you'll probably never hear of it.
Yeah.
The victim might say something about it. Like that's usually how it comes out. Like, I can't believe that AWS
would,
support
yeah.
let Eric log into my account. He wasn't even me. He impersonated me. You know, that kind of
Yeah.
thing. That's how it usually
that's
comes
when
out.
I'm my alter ego.
Yes. Evil Eric.
Evil Eric. Yeah. Well, another announcement, it's not really an announcement, it's just something I came across. We happened to be using one of their actions, and then I saw, let me take a look at their organization. And they had lots of nice little GitHub actions here. A couple that stood out was like the template action here, as well as, which one was it? I think it was down below here. Maybe it was template repository. I forget exactly, but yeah, for those of you interested in GitHub Actions as much as we are, I'm always taking inspiration for what other people are doing out there. If you guys have any cool GitHub Actions you come across, do share them in the channel. I'll check those out too. State of Engineering by Retool has come out. Not too much revolutionary here. Open source continues to be incredibly useful and adopted. Commits are pretty high at least one contribution per a month by senior engineers. And people continue to use lots of Stack Overflow to get their job done, or basically code committed and copied from other places. KubeView, yet another tool to visualize workloads inside of your Kubernetes cluster. There's more than a few of these out there. I can't keep them straight. They vary between the type that you run locally, like Lens, and then the type that runs in cluster and lets you visualize the workloads that way. My biggest qualm with all of these solutions is they never solve the authentication piece. So you're always deploying this web service that's public, and you have to solve the authentication piece using whatever you have in place for that.
Yeah.
I wish that was made easier.
There's actually 2 other categories probably on top of that. One is SaaS platforms. They have a few out there that manage that.
Many SaaS platforms.
And then the fourth one is the cloud providers themselves. So like AWS now has workload visualization for EKS, and Google has it for GKE, and all that other stuff.
So they're finally displaying the workloads inside of your EKS cluster now, but are they showing the relationships between them?
You can drill down through the relationships to get to them.
Okay.
Yes, but it's not that great. It's not as robust as this, but it exists.
Yeah. I believe that's the core business of, so Rancher does a lot of that, of course, as well as.
I was going to use them as an example when I said SaaS platforms. Yeah.
Yeah. Then there's formerly Reactive Ops. What are they called now?
I forget. They got
Fairwinds. Yeah. So
Fairwinds,
they do that too. A lot of that, helping you manage Kubernetes clusters across platforms, across clouds.
Yeah.
All right. Let's see. Last one was something highlighted by somebody in the Slack channel. I forget who it was, but this past week, I think it was, or 2 weeks ago, maybe, Bitnami was down, and anybody who relied on Bitnami was affected by that. The gist of it came down to something with their CloudFront distribution, and I don't know if this assertion to me seems faulty to me, but who am I to say? They seem to assert that because the index file was 14 megs and the volume of requests that they get for that every month in the terabytes led to some trigger that blocked it and deactivated it. So I must assume then that they went through AWS support and they shared some details there, but I haven't heard of that happening unless you're using like WAF or something.
So I can only think of like resource exhaustion as to the credit card that was paying for it.
Maybe.
Well,
God, I hope that
also-
wasn't the case.
Well, I know from previous experience that Bitnami and Amazon actually have a pretty close partnership.
I would expect.
They actually, a lot of the like official things that AWS uses as quick starts and everything are built on top of Bitnami images and all of that. So I'm sure if they're asserting that's probably what happened, because Amazon would immediately send them a cease and desist if they were saying something that was like, bad on
Well, I don't know if it would go
Amazon,
that way,
their
but I
problem.
do believe that, well, just the fact that Amazon themselves were probably impacted by this.
Yeah, that too.
That too would expedite.
Does anyone know if this is why they stopped hosting older versions of their charts? Like we had external DNS chart sourcing from Bitnami's public repository, and it was like, I think a couple major versions back, but we used this as recently as like a few months ago to stand up a new KS cluster. But yeah, we were troubleshooting something and recently discovered it wasn't available, so we updated to the latest grade.
Yeah, so that is that you would be impacted by that. So if you were pinning to the specific version, you should be able to still download it because they didn't delete the tarballs, but the index no longer publishes them.
Nice. Okay. I guess that brings me to like my next question. Do you guys have any suggestions for like strategies for caching these charts if we don't want to rely on public repositories or anything like that?
Yeah, well, yeah. So there's I guess a few common patterns, and anybody else can probably chime in and add additional ones. If you are already using Artifactory, I believe it has pull through cache for charts. So that's one obvious option. There are other managed solutions for hosting these. I think Cloudsmith will also serve Helm charts for you. You can vendor them into your own organization. And these days Helm is smart enough. You can just point it at a directory and it'll deploy that. So very frequently, that's what we are doing with our customers is we vendor in the charts, not necessarily because of this reason, but mostly because we often have to patch or do some changes to the upstream charts and can't wait for those things to be merged.
I see.
There are a couple other interesting options. I mean, these days it's so easy to host your own chart registry. Like back in the day, you needed to use like Chart Museum or one of the other options. There's tons of GitHub Actions now that'll help you manage your own chart repository. Now, if you need private artifacts, that's going to be a little bit harder than public ones. Like GitHub Pages are going to be public by default. And a lot of the examples where the GitHub Actions are for that. The thing that was news to me as of just like 6 months ago or so was that ECR can actually be used as a chart registry. So you can have OCI packages for Helm charts. So if you're already using ECR and you're on AWS, that seems like a pretty nice way to provide continuity.
Oh, perfect. Yeah, we were definitely looking at the factory. There is some, obviously overhead for that, but ECR sounds like a nice option. We'll share that with the team. Appreciate that.
Yeah. All those other solutions, unfortunately, though, are bring your own synchronization method.
Yeah.
Like you could store them there, but you still have to figure out a way to get them from the public repository into your ECR repo, like on a regular basis.
Makes sense.
So,
Yeah.
Cool.
Hey, good to see you stop by, Ronnie.
Yeah.
Let's see. Any other questions on the Bitnami chart repo postmortem before we move on to the next topics? All right, let's kick the hornet's nest and start with this one here. Yeah, there's lots of disclaimers before we get into this. We are not all knowing. We're just some person on the internet. But hey, why not say it? Because I think it kind of a lot of your points in this thread, Vlad, resonated with me as much as I don't want them to be true. I can resonate or I can identify with them. So Vlad's controversial post this past week was basically just saying that platform teams are dead. Stop trying to build your own platform. And with some very rare exceptions, trying to build your own platform, it just doesn't work. So one of the points that you bring up here, I think is, true, is like we're still in this mindset of what we were trying to do in 2016 and building platforms. And at that time, there were definitely no other platforms. And the first thing everybody did when they saw Kubernetes was go, hey, I know what I can use that for, building my own platform. So then everyone came out and built their own platform, Kubernetes. And now there's a very fractured market of 100 different products to build platforms on top of Kubernetes. Some are enterprise, some are open source, most of them are probably abandoned. And then the perpetual pursuit of companies. I think it's a great pursuit. I think it's a worthy pursuit where companies want to have a platform to standardize the delivery of their apps for their developers so they can move faster. It's just what happens is those platforms are just continuously under development, continuously out of date in terms of documentation. And instead of actually trying to speed things up for the developer, frequently it's slowing things down for the developer. I think that was the gist of what you had in your thread here. Do you want to add anything to that, Vlad, before we get into a discussion?
Nope, that was pretty accurate. I wasn't expecting this thread to be as popular as it was. Like, I posted it, I stayed online for a couple hours, and then I got into some meetings, and it went popular. Yeah, I don't see platform teams working. And the fact that I'm trying not to go on too many asides, and I'm trying not to be mean. So give me a minute to gather my thoughts. But I covered this a bit in my how should I run containers on AWS flowchart, which is in desperate need of an update. But Kubernetes really was the most awesome thing until 2019-ish. I'm not gonna go into what happened and why I think Kubernetes is not a thing anymore, because I'm gonna turn out way too mean. But we're still trying to build stuff that AWS or Google or Azure or FlyIO or Railway or
Crossplane.
There was another one. No, Crossplane is a whole other thing. Don't get started. But companies that have like hundreds of engineers, really focused engineers, that have tons of technical writers, that have tons of solution architects that do like nice YouTube videos and give examples and train your team. Like, they build platforms. The idea that you, as a random company, can do that better is shocking. And I don't understand how that's still a thing. And this was my thread of like, yeah, dudes, it's not working. I'm sorry. We've seen that is not working. Let's stop joking and start focusing on building things.
Thank you, Vlad.
That's about it. And again, it's a Twitter thread. It has 30 something, 40 tweets. I know it's offendingly long and way too short at the same time. I would love to have written like a long blog post on it. I didn't. I don't have the time and the incentives are not there. Like, I'm still trying to update the flowchart, and that hasn't been a thing yet because it keeps getting pushed down my priority list.
Well, it's kind of like a comic, right? You got to test your bits out every now and then. You see what works and what's worth investing in. And maybe this has legs, maybe it doesn't.
It's super helpful for people and I should do it and it's going to push the industry forward and la di da di da, but it's going to take me a couple weeks of work because it was obvious that the flowchart is not enough. There needs to be a blog post associated with it. And I'm sorry, but I don't like it doesn't make sense for me. Instead of working a week on that blog post, which writing is really hard, by the way, I could go do consulting one day and I would make more money.
Yeah.
And this is a way more complicated topic around community and open source and all that, but the incentives are not there. So like the threat, it's tiny.
Vlad, can we sponsor you?
No.
You sure?
Let's not get into all that. Open source funding is a really complex topic. Let's not go into that. I guess any questions about why platform teams are dead?
Yeah.
I have no questions. I just want to pile on and say that I've been very frustrated working on a homegrown platform.
What hasn't been working with the homegrown platform?
Well, to begin with, it's in Chinese.
Okay.
And it's very 1999-ish reminiscent.
Why? What's then? I mean, 99. If you're thinking platforms, that's pretty far out there.
Yeah, I mean, it runs on modern clouds, but
Heroku.
it doesn't use anything beyond EC2 and whatever the equivalents are and all the other ones. So it is multi-cloud. I will give it that.
Yeah. And how long have they been working on the platform?
I've only been there 3 months, so I don't know all the details, but I suspect that this platform may predate the company just based on what it looks like.
So and does it predate like modern things like Kubernetes and Docker and?
No, it does use it. It has adapted. It has evolved into using those.
And that's a valid example of a thing. Like moving from that to whatever AWS service, multi-cloud service, whatever, would cost a ton. Like, I don't know. Spotify is not going to suddenly move all their services to something easy. Like that's a legit use case in my view.
So I think the best solution that has been given so far is for us to make Terraform a provider on the platform. And I think that's going to be our least disruptive option, right? So Terraform then gives us the ability to have many more providers, right? But I think that's the only wiggle room that I've found, right? The thing that I'm most, I mean, I've written long articles about all the shortcomings that we have. Of course, they're in internal wikis, and I'm not going to share them here. But what I will share is that I was writing some Grafana, and I really want to refer to a group of servers as a group of servers, not as a group of IP addresses in the config file.
Yeah.
And as far as I know, I haven't found a way to do that yet. I mean, mind you, the documentation is also in Chinese, so I have
that
have a little bit of a language barrier in that I can't
Yeah.
search in Chinese. I can definitely read Chinese through the lens of Google, but searching has proven to be a challenge.
Yeah. Matt Gowie, I know you've been kind of looking closely at what's coming next and what you want to focus on and putting a certain emphasis around platforms. I think Crossplane is one of the things that you've been looking for as an open source platform. Have you been evaluating this as a whole? Did you see Vlad's thread? Any thoughts on this?
I did not see Vlad's thread. I definitely would like to check it out at some point, or I'm going to read it after this call. But yeah, I think it's interesting. I honestly think these things come down to, hey, what is the complexity of the product? What is the complexity of the organization? How are they, what makes sense? Like I wouldn't suggest to like put all your money into fly.io if you know that there's certain aspects of your business that are going to be like you're going to need to go beyond the basics. You're going to need to have potentially, a database that's not going to be the traditional Postgres at some point. So I don't know. I think it depends. I think it's a valid point. I think a lot of folks could really benefit from the idea of avoiding, platforms altogether. But I think that the platform still has a space. I don't know. This is both railing against internal developer platforms and platform teams. I don't know. I'll have to read it. I'm out of the loop.
Yeah. No, that was just curious. Well, let's move on to another topic.
One more
go
thing
on. Yeah.
before we go on. I'm gonna answer questions in Slack if you'll have any, or on Twitter. But like, this whole thread started because Proton didn't announce the 2 new features last week, and I was like, God damn it, Proton keeps hitting bullseye after bullseye after bullseye. So,
what were the cool new features? The components or something, composable.
Yeah, the components thing is awesome. Like, I mentioned this in the thread, like Proton, it's, in my opinion, not yet there, but Proton is going, it's hitting every single right step on the way to becoming the thing that kind of abstracts services away without hiding them. So I'm very, very excited about Proton. And in praising those features, I was like, yeah, platforms are dead. Proton, Spacelift, and Plumi are the only solutions, the only products I see pushing us forward, and the actual future. And they were like, oh, that's interesting. Tell us more. And I wrote this thread, which
the part I have trouble reconciling is where Plumi fits in the long run. When with Proton, are they mutually exclusive? Are they complementary? I know Proton supports like Terraform, but it seems more optimized around doing things in CloudFormation, which would make sense since that's by Amazon.
It's a bit weird because there's overlap. There are many directions that are happening, but Plumi specifically, through its universal infrastructure as code and through its automation API, Plumi has, they announced it last year, Plumi has a really, really powerful automation API. Again, not mature, la-di-da-di-da, just like Plumi. One could argue mainly, but the thing is, Plumi can also do builds and checks and stuff beyond infrastructure as code. So I like that. I don't think Proton supports Plumi yet.
It does not look like it, yeah.
It's definitely supports CloudFormation and Terraform, and I don't know, they have an open roadmap, so maybe. But yeah, just to bring it back to AWS.
I have just one thought of why all this talk about platforms and why people are doing platforms and everything. I think it all boils down to, we have, as an industry, we have this desire to have I don't know how to define platform without using the word platform, but to have a platform where the back-end engineers can set up all of the base components of it and establish guardrails and company policies and configurable elements, and then publish that to application developers who can easily consume that and spin up services in a self-service method. And I think that's kind of what everyone is striving for. And there isn't a solution in the industry right now that ticks the boxes of all of those things. And I think that's why we have all this nonsense going on. If someone truly had that, like that out there, I think people would stop developing platforms on their own, and they would use that thing that provides those functionalities.
Is anyone on the call using Proton yet? I'm really curious about it. Definitely intrigued.
Scratching my head. What is Proton?
It was announced at reInvent, I think, last year, right? And it's a way to publish what Matt is basically talking about, but I don't know if it checks all of those boxes. And they recently added Terraform support. So
Another one
Competes
that's
with DevOps, Azure DevOps, maybe?
no.
It's trying to solve the problem of we have all this Terraform code, we have all these awesome Terraform modules, they're super hard to use. So they offer, they basically offer platform engineers, quotes, a way to build nice modules and expose them with an interface. And then they offer non-technical users a pretty UI where they automatically get like the variables from Terraform and you can select them with a nice drop down and a bunch of features around that, like two-way Git synchronizations and so on and so forth.
Yeah. So still backed by
That's
Git and GitOps.
the idea. Yeah, like it's still GitOps, it's still infrastructure as code, it's just a pretty UI on top, kind of ish maybe. Does that make sense?
I think it may replace something that we're using or that we have used in many companies where I've worked at, which was
Yeah.
homegrown.
So one of the next questions was from Stefan. What kind of tools are available to get an overview of clusters and all the apps deployed in them, as well as their versions? Well, have you checked out KubeView? No, but so that was one new project we brought up today. Another one that I would recommend that we'd like to use the most, it's kind of like your IDE for Kubernetes, which is Lens. It's an open source project and it's pretty easy to get up and running. So I think it's, what is it, lens.io?
That's a local app though,
Lens.
right? You install it locally and it runs.
It is. So this is like a VS Code, you know, like an app that, well, I guess VS Code, you don't need to do that locally with GitHub Dev. But yeah, it's a like an Electron app that runs locally.
Lens is awesome. I really recommend that one. The other ones that I've seen are K9s, K9S. Yeah, that's more of a, like if you're a Vim pro and you're interested in.
Oh,
doing
right.
things from your
Yeah,
terminal.
exactly. It's the terminal based version.
But
Yeah, I
similar
forgot about that
thing.
one.
And then of course, Kubernetes dashboard is the like self-hosted one that I think everybody used to use. And now it's kind of fallen out of style.
Yeah. We used to deploy that standard and now it's been years since we really did anything with that dashboard.
It used to be a real pain to install too.
Yeah. We always had to just access it with kube proxy, which isn't the answer to me for remote access to your web apps. All right.
Look how we all just assumed that overview of clusters was a Kubernetes cluster.
Well, okay. To be fair, I think I might have just reduced the.
I know, but I'm saying I
Yeah.
was just pointing out that
Yeah.
everyone's mind went right there and didn't even consider that they might be talking about something else.
Yeah, exactly. It was oh, Nomad cluster, but of course.
Could be an EKS, an ECS cluster.
I mean, that's what my company, we do everything in ECS. We're not using.
What do you use for ECS? Curious.
I mean, we just have a Fargate backend and launch our apps that way.
But no
we actually
visualization.
just had a
No.
discussion today about how it's not, it's actually not very conducive. Like it's not very, I don't know, we're running into all types of problems with it, so.
Although
Yeah.
the one thing that I will say is that some of the monitoring platforms out there do a pretty good job of visualizing the workloads and what's running on them. Like Datadog as an example, if you're running the Datadog agent for either ECS or Kubernetes, it will actually show you like all your containers, what versions of images they're running, like all of that kind of stuff. It's pretty.
Yeah, I don't know if there's
That's
anything
pretty
out
good.
there for this, for ECS, is there?
Not that
I
I've
doubt
seen.
I
Closest
mean,
thing
we
is
just
like what
rely
Matt
on
said
like
with Datadog.
CloudWatch and
Yeah.
New Relic and all that.
It's really
Yeah, they
fascinating.
also
Actually.
add- Go ahead.
No, I was just saying Datadog's good for that too, for like getting some insights into ECS.
Yeah, it does a pretty good job visualizing that. But I'm just surprised, given that how many apps there are for Kubernetes. There's nothing really for ECS.
I think like
Kubernetes being
it kind of gets overshadowed, right? Everybody went to Kubernetes, and my last company, we went to Kubernetes and we adopted it early, and it was a nightmare. So I don't know what it's like today. I haven't tried to implement it today.
I bet in Amazon it's 10-1 companies using ECS versus EKS, for example,
Probably even higher than that.
or even higher than that. Yeah,
Yeah.
that would be my guess.
but I
The
bet
one
you
thing
their
I will
workloads are smaller.
maybe the one thing I would say would be that the ECS dashboard is also like the console itself is actually far more evolved than the EKS one was. They have a lot, or at least they did. I haven't compared them recently, but it used to be better.
I think it's improved a lot, but that definitely was true for a long time.
Like right there, that's I think
Oops,
that
I already-
the thing that you
yeah, I
just clicked on.
closed
Yeah.
I closed it already.
I also ask like, why is this necessary? Because they sound like, oh my god, it would be so awesome to have. I've implemented it in a bunch of companies and then nobody used it. Like, why do you?
Yeah, yeah.
It's
I-
pretty. Don't get me
yeah.
wrong, and it sounds like something super useful. But
To me, it's one of those things. It's the guy who just joined the company, doesn't know what everything else is. Man, I wish there was just a dashboard that showed me how everything was and was running, because the documentation is out of date and it's really hard to visualize everything that's been deployed. However, after he's worked there for 3 months, then he knows what it all is and doesn't care about that tool anymore.
probably like having the documentation will help more. Like it's
Would be
super
more
awesome
helpful. Yeah,
as an
up to date.
idea. It doesn't help them much. And if it's like we just want a single pane of glass to see how our applications are doing, like that's an SLO. But it's either like it didn't help as much as I thought it would help. So keep that in mind before implementing it.
Just saw we have Pepe on the line. You asked a question in the channel. I want to make sure we got to that one. Pepe, you're asking, what's the greatest and latest way to deploy API gateway Lambda pairs, Lambda aliases, Lambda versions, multiple stages, things done inside or outside of Terraform or done in a pipeline? Working on ADO pipeline at the moment, using AWS infrastructure, code deploy for Blue Green Canary. I want to avoid at all costs to have to do it with a Terraform deploy to do a deploy. I do not believe Terraform is a good deployment tool, and I have the AWS tools for ADO pipeline. I agree overall that Terraform is not a great deployment tool. It's like a sledgehammer and great for building infrastructure, and it's pretty bad for doing, light remodeling. So what is the best way these days for deploying your Lambdas? I think it depends a little bit also on your framework. I mean, are you writing raw Lambdas? You're not using serverless or a framework that has deployments built in?
Yeah, this one's in this case is .NET, but I'm trying to build up a module, not a module, but a project that someone can use as a template to deploy Lambdas and API gateways pairs, because it's a very common pattern in our company. And most of the time you need a blue-green deployment no matter what.
And when you say a pair, is it like deploy the front end and deploy the back end as a unit at the same time? Or
No.
What
I mean, the pair is an API gateway with a Lambda integration.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Yeah. And sometimes you could have, for example, one of the clients will have one API gateway, 350 Lambdas.
Yeah.
So how do you deploy it? Do you do this? So if you change something in the API gateway, do you do one stage in the API gateway and you switch the stages? How do you test that to do the deployment? And if you do the API sorry, if you do the lambda, you do lambda aliases, and you pair it with the stage. What is the, you know, the easiest, that's most problem-free way of doing it? I'm flexible too, so you don't have to like, oh, we're going to be in under construction for a while until we deploy the new version of the API.
Are you talking about like the initial deployment, not keeping up, like you wouldn't have a pipeline that would keep up with the lambda, the initial pushing it out for the first time?
No, after. So so the lambdas are deployed, and yeah, and so the subsequent, not the first one, because the first one is kind of is the simplest one, but the subsequent ones for a day-to-day of like they change code in the lambda. You deploy the lambda. Deploying the lambda is not a problem in the sense of like uploading the artifact to an S3 bucket. But then how do you trigger the switch to the new version? Do you do it as a version to the same lambda? You do an alias, and you have multiple alias like blue and green. And then you switch them over by doing an API call, like, or AWS CLI command. In the case of ADO, you have tools to do that, where you can switch the lambda. But do you do it in alias? You don't do it in alias. You use a stage to point to the new lambda with a different name, for example. There's many ways of doing it. There's too many ways to do it. That's a problem.
Yeah.
Because I had to look it up. ADO is Azure DevOps.
Yeah, that's for short in our company too. Yeah, we just have pipeline set up and we deploy a new version.
Actually, ADO is Microsoft's second overloading of ADO, because it used to be active data objects, which was like how they did all of their database access in like all their tools for 20 plus years or something like that. So, but specifically on this, I think you have like four different questions sort of wrapped into the same question here, right? So there's a bunch of things that you're asking, but one of them I can tell you, for sure. Have you actually looked at Canary deployments on API Gateway itself?
No,
like to do your blue.
No.
Oh, okay. So API Gateway actually supports canaries, where you spin up another stage with your new functions, and then you send a percentage of traffic to that stage, and then eventually you can basically switch that stage to be your current stage that everything's pointing at once it all works, and then you can go through that process again, to spin up a new stage, set that as a canary, say send 10% of your traffic over there to make sure that it works, and monitor all your CloudWatch metrics, etc. And then you can dial that up, if you like gradual, increases, or you can eventually just that once you're satisfied that it works, you can make that your production stage, and then you basically just promote it. And then the next time you want to deploy, you just create a new stage with your new code basically, and then you do that over and over again. So
and that's within API Gateway, not okay. And it does it work with REST APIs, or is that API version 2?
Yep, it works with REST APIs for sure.
Okay, all right.
In fact, I don't know if it works with API Gateway v2, but it definitely works in the original API Gateway, because I've done that for years. Yeah, so that's definitely one. And then I personally, just from my experience, have found that while it is a little bit more maintenance to pin to very specific versions of your function, it will be the thing that causes you the least amount of headache over time, because it will be very clear, like this method is integrated to this particular lambda at this version, and then you can always like easily troubleshoot on that. And the other thing you can do is if you have the case where you need to like support multiple versions of your lambdas, is you can introduce versioning in your URL paths as well, so that you can have multiple versions of the REST API basically running at the same time and talking to two different versions of your serverless functions on the back end, your Lambda functions on the back end.
Yeah, okay. So you do it through, you prefer to do it on the version of the Lambda, not an alias to a version of the Lambda.
Yeah, because the problem is it's too easy to make the version alias like it's mutable, and then it's too easy for someone to switch and not realize that you've switched current or production or whatever you're calling that alias, like to point to something else, where it becomes really easy to see that you've switched it to point from version 20 to version 21 or whatever, whatever your versioning scheme is. Like that becomes really, really obvious, like really quickly when that happens. So just again, I don't think there's any right way to do any of this. This is just kind of from my experience of running a fairly large Lambda implementation previous.
Yeah, that's really good. Thank you, man.
All right, let's see what the other questions were. We had a ton. Not sure. We have about 5 minutes left, so let's see what we can get to quickly. Isaac, you had a question on spacelift. What are folks doing when they have a spacelift stack that assumes multiple roles in multiple accounts? Let's see.
Yes, I did. And the idea is we have a stack that can deploy stuff to various accounts. And, spacelift gives you an external ID when you're setting up the role. And if we reuse that external ID, we can automate the role creations throughout all the other roles and the other accounts. But if we're going to say we should use one external ID to do the handshake between spacelift and the main stack role, and then use a different external ID between that stack role and the roles in other accounts, then we have to do a different process to update that external ID. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think that roughly makes sense. For the record, what we are doing is we're 100% of the time right now still using what do you call it? Managed, self-managed runners. So we are doing that all within our own infrastructure. If you're using external ID, that's when you're on the public runners for spacelift, no?
Yes.
So I am probably not the best one to talk about it. Matt, you might know, or one of the other guys. The gist of what I think you'd want to do is you have a single role that will trust that external ID, and then from there you can assume all the other roles, and those can be those can be consistent with all the roles you have today. So basically, you only need one more role that is for spacelift to assume, and then from there your Terraform can assume the other roles as it would ordinarily.
Yeah, that's how we have it set up.
Okay.
We're just curious about whether it's a bad practice to reuse the external ID through all the roles. Like
specifically that.
Yeah.
What's the reason not to differentiate it, for example? Why? Or
yeah,
it can't be a bad idea to have more than less.
Yes, it can.
Okay.
You have to manage all those things and make sure you don't make mistakes every day.
Okay.
If we reuse the spacelift ID, we can just it happens in one shot. The automation takes care of it while you're creating the role. You just index in the external ID. But if we're going to use and say that do it differently, then we have to figure out another way to update the external IDs for the roles within our accounts.
Yeah, it's somewhat of, if you use multiple external IDs, I think it's somewhat of like almost like security by obscurity, because at the end of the day, it's the same entity that can assume all of those different roles. Like the public workers have the rights to assume those. So the fact that there are 3 of them, doesn't really buy you anything more, because that same public workers have the ability to assume like all of them. So I don't think you're buying anything from that. If you're really concerned about it, use private workers and give them specific roles to do what they need to do, and then you'll be better. You'll be in a better position. But I know that comes with a lot of additional costs, both on on the spacelift side as well as on the AWS side to run them. So
Right. Got it.
Yeah.
Thanks. Yeah, we were wondering about that. I was like, does it really buy me anything? It's still the same role, but yeah, that's
yeah.
Yeah, I changed my position and agree with what Matt said. All right. Well, we are out of time for today. I want to make sure we are mindful of everyone's busy schedule. So with that said, let's wrap it up for today. Thank you everyone for participating in our office hours. We'll have a recording of today's session posted to the YouTube channel at youtube.com/cloudposse in a few hours. If you haven't already connected with me on LinkedIn, head over to linkedin.com/in/Osterman and connect. And if you're curious about what it's like to work with Cloud Posse or just want to see if we might be a potential fit for your business and what you need, go to cloudposse.com/quiz to get started. Again, that's cloudposse.com/quiz to get started. Thanks all. Talk to you next week. Same time, same place.